A word before we step into this one. If the kind of story I'm about to tell is the kind you'd want more of, not just one, but 10, each given the full treatment in a voice meant for the dark. I've put together a collection with the folks at Forbidden Unresolved Stories. It's called What the Mountain Keeps. 10 files from 10 counties, 5 states, spanning 1893 to 1955. Every one of them walked up into ground that looked easy, and every one was closed by the law with the wrong word. 10 hours to sit within the dark, start to finish. The link's in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. Now then, there are hollows in these mountains that no map will hold. You try to draw them, the ink runs. You send a man up there with orders, and the orders come back altered. You know the type? I mean the ones that sit lower than the ground around them, so the fog never lifts. The ones where the birds don't sing right, and the water tastes like rust, even in a dry summer. This is a story about one of those, and before we get into it, do me a favor. Tell me where you're listening from tonight. County, state, country, whatever you're willing to share. I want to know who's out there in the dark with me. Drop it in the comments while I lay out what I'm about to lay out. The year is 1873. The place is a corner of West Virginia, a state barely a decade old, just old enough to know it owns itself. Marlin County, up in the high Alleghenies, where the ridges squeeze together into narrow, wet folds. Nobody surveyed it twice. The nearest town of any size is called Red Gap. A rail spur dies there. A telegraph line dies there. And a single road runs out of town north by northwest for about 20 miles before it forgets it was ever a road. Somewhere along that last stretch, tucked into a fold of the mountain that makes its own weather, is a place the locals call Harrow Hollow. It has a family in it, or something that used to be a family. And in 3 years, 3 grown men have taken the road that passes near it, and 3 grown men have not returned. 3 years, 3 men, same 20 miles. That's enough for the Federal Circuit to take notice. So on the 3rd morning of October, a deputy United States Marshal named Obadiah Vessey stepped off the train at Red Gap with a saddlebag, a Winchester, and a sealed envelope from the district court in Wheeling. He was 41 years old that fall. Tall, thin through the shoulders, wide through the hands, with a face burned red from riding open country and eyes the color of slate right before rain. He'd been a marshal 13 years. Before that, 4 years in the war on the Union side, and before that, farm work he never spoke about. He was known in the district as the man they sent for cases nobody wanted to put on paper. That's the kind of case this was. The sheriff of Marlin County, a heavy-shouldered man named Merritt Culpepper, met him at the depot in a black coat that had seen better winters. Culpepper limped. An old wound from Antietam, he'd tell you if pressed. Though most days he just called it his weather leg. He was 58 and looked 70, and the first thing he did when Vessey shook his hand was look past him at the train, as if hoping there would be more of him. There wasn't. Vessey rode alone. He always did. Have you ever felt that, listener? That little sinking when help was supposed to come, and only one man came. And you already know one man isn't enough. Leave it below if you've been on either side of it. The one waiting, or the one who showed up. They walked from the depot to the courthouse without speaking. Red Gap in 1873 was a 2-street town with a livery, a bank that failed twice, and a tavern where the local men drank cider strong enough to strip paint. There were more women than men in Red Gap, because the war had eaten the men. There were more graves than houses at the churchyard, because the fever of '69 had eaten the rest. It was the kind of town that measured itself by what it had lost. In the sheriff's office, on a plain deal table, Culpepper laid out 3 folders. He didn't open them right away. He set his hand on top of them like a man holding down a lid on a pot that wants to boil over. And then he said, before Vessey said anything at all, I want you to understand something before you read these. Whatever you decide to do up in that hollow, I cannot help you. My deputies won't ride past the second creek. My townspeople won't sell to you if they think you're going up. And I myself, at 58, and with one leg mostly for show, I will be no earthly good to you past the mill. Do you understand me? Vessey said. I understand you. Culpepper opened the first folder. His name was Ezra Wickfield, said the sheriff. He was a state surveyor out of Charleston, sent up in the spring of '71 to walk the Ridge Road for the county map. 36 years old, married. 2 witnesses saw him take breakfast at the last farmhouse before the road climbs, and no one after that saw him again. His horse came back on its own 11 days later, with the saddle turned sideways and one stirrup missing. His theodolite was found 6 months later in a creek bed a mile east of the road, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth that wasn't his. Vessey said, wrapped in oilcloth. That means someone put it there. Culpepper nodded once slow. That is what it means. He opened the second folder. His name was Barnaby Chessup, he said. A peddler. 61 years old, thin as a rail, drove a painted wagon selling needles, thread, tin cups, patent tonics, the usual. He had been on that road twice a year for 15 years without a scratch. In the fall of '72, his wagon was found off the road at a place called the Turnaround. A wide bend where you can, if you know how, get a wagon back around toward town. The horses were in the traces calm. The lantern was still lit. Everything he owned was in the wagon, including the day's takings in a leather pouch under the seat. Everything except him, Vessey said. Everything except him. Culpepper said yes. He opened the third folder. His name, said Culpepper, was the Reverend Autumn Whitlatch. A Methodist circuit rider, 49 years old, from over near Elkins. He rode the Ridge Road once a season, holding meetings in the 2 or 3 homesteads still up there, and always stopping at a place called the Mill to water his horse and eat a cold biscuit. This past July, his horse came back into town alone on a Sunday morning, still saddled. The saddle was on backwards, on the pommel, tied there with a piece of cord that came out of no saddler's shop I know of, was a scrap of black cloth cut off the Reverend's own coat. Just the coat. Vessey said. 3 men, 3 years, same 20 miles. And the sheriff said, same family. Vessey looked up. Culpepper looked at him for a long moment, then said, You're going to hear the name up here about 10 more times before you ride. I might as well be the one to say it first. The family is called Harrow. They have lived in that hollow since 1798, when a man named Josiah Harrow took a mining stake from the old Northern Neckland office and never came out again. They have not sold to anyone. They have not bought from anyone. They have not registered a death, a marriage, or a claim in 75 years. The last time a Harrow was seen in this town was 1849, and she did not speak to anyone. She bought powder. She bought salt. She bought lamp oil, and she walked back out. Vessey said, How do you know they're still up there? And Culpepper said, Because we still lose men. That night, Vessey sat in a room over the tavern and read the 3 folders through twice. He wrote nothing down. He never did on a case like this. He'd learned young that a case like this you carry in your head, because pages have a way of walking off. He slept 4 hours. He dreamed about a wheel turning in slow water and a hand on the wheel that wasn't in the water at all. At dawn he went to the livery to hire a horse and a guide. The horse was easy. The guide took the sheriff's letter, a promise of federal pay in silver, and about half a bottle of the tavern's cider before he agreed. His name was Zephaniah Kroll, and he was as much a part of that country as the rock. 51 years old, wire, tight, 6 feet exactly in his boots, with a face weathered to the color of a walnut hull and hair the color of wet stone. He had lived his whole life in one of the last homesteads before the road ran out. He knew every gap, every game trail, every creek that changed its mind in a hard rain. He had been up past the mill twice, both times before he was 30, and he did not intend a third. He told Vessey so at the livery over the neck of his own bay mare. "Marshal," he said, "I will take you as far as the mill. I will show you the road up from there. I will show you the sign on the last tree that anyone who was not born there ever set a knife into. But I will not walk you into that hollow. If you go alone. And if you come out alone. And if you do not come out, I will ride back to town, and I will tell them a story that will not have your name in it. Do you accept that?" Vessey said, "I accept that." And Zephaniah Kroll shook his hand once hard and said, "Then we ride at first light." They rode out of Red Gap on the 4th of October, 1873. 2 men, 3 horses, a spare loaded with grain, and a small canvas tent. The first day was easy. The road climbed steady, cut through second, growth timber and old cornfields going back to brush, and past a dozen homesteads where women stopped their work at the fence to watch them ride by. Every single one of those women knew where Vessey was going. He could see it in how they looked at him. Not with pity. Pity was for the freshly widowed. This was the older look, the one for a man already gone, but still walking. They camped that night at a wide bend in a creek Zephaniah called 2 miles short, because it was 2 miles short of the mill. They ate salt pork, hard bread, and coffee boiled black enough to stand a spoon in. Zephaniah did most of the talking. He told Vessey about the country, the way an old preacher tells the Bible. Going back and forth in time, jumping from a story about his grandfather to a story about last winter, and back again without stopping for breath. He said the ridge had been walked by 3 peoples he knew of before white settlers ever set foot on it, and each one of them had left it alone at the same place, right where the road bent into what was now Harrow Hollow. He said his own grandfather, who had trapped the whole range and feared nothing that ran or crawled, would not spend a night within 2 miles of that fold in the mountain. And then he said, "And this is the part I need you to hear, Marshal. My grandfather told my father, and my father told me, that the Harrows were not always the way they are, that they were once as ordinary a people as any settler family west of the Blue Ridge. That something up in that hollow reached them over the years and made them into what they are now. And I do not know if he meant a thing or a way of living or a hunger, but I know he was not a fanciful man. And he did not say it twice for effect. He said it once, the way a doctor tells you the truth." Vessey said, "And what did he think they are now?" And Zephaniah looked at the fire for a while. And finally he said, "Marshal, I do not think they are people anymore, in the way you and I are people. I think they are what people become when nothing checks them for 4 generations. I think they are what happens when a family runs out of the world and starts eating in on itself." Vessey did not answer that. He turned in and slept badly. In the middle of the night, he heard a whippoorwill call 3 times and stop. And after it stopped, from a long way off, over a ridge and down into a fold, he heard something answer it. Not a bird, not a man, something in between that had taken the trouble to learn the call and gotten it almost right. That was the first night. That was the easy night. Have you ever, listener, had that feeling? The one that starts in the back of your neck. That some part of you already knows how a thing is going to end and is only waiting for the rest of you to catch up. Leave it below. Tell me the last time your body knew something before your head did." On the second day they reached the mill. The mill was a low, half-collapsed building of chestnut logs, beside a creek that came down out of the hollow in a long white line of hard water. The wheel was still on it, a great dark wheel of pieced oak, black with age and green with a moss so thick it looked like fur. It turned slowly, without hurry, and it made a sound as it turned that was not the sound water on wood should make. It made a sound like a low groan that came from underneath the wheel, and not the wheel itself. Zephaniah would not go near it. He tied his horse 100 yards downstream and sat down on a rock and pointed with his chin. "The road," he said, "goes up from behind the mill along the near bank of the creek for about 3 miles. It bends left at a broken oak. From that oak, it is another mile to a clearing. In the clearing there is a house. There is only one house left in that hollow now, Marshal, and it belongs to them. There used to be 4. There are 3 foundations left, and a lot of chimney stones in a pile at the far end. The oldest have all gone into the one house. That's how they are now. All in the one house, all of a piece," he said. "And remember," she said, "don't go up past the mill. That was my mother, Marshal, and she has been dead 19 years. And I still hear it. That was every mother in this county for 100 years. Don't go up past the mill. And I have never gone up past it. And here I am watching you go." Vessey said nothing for a long time. He checked his rifle. He checked his sidearm. He put a piece of hardtack in his coat and a wax paper packet of matches in an inner pocket. He gave Zephaniah his last letter, the one every marshal in that district carried, folded in oilcloth with instructions and next of kin and the small line at the bottom about who to write to, if the body could not be recovered. And he shook Zephaniah's hand and said, 3 days. If I am not back in 3 days, ride to Red Gap and tell them what you saw. And Zephaniah said, Marshal, I will wait 1 day, not 3. 1. Because whatever they are, if they take you, they will come looking for the man who brought you. And I do not intend to be here when they do. And Vessey nodded and said, That is fair. He walked up past the mill wheel, and it turned once behind him as he passed, and the sound it made was not water. And since we are here, the story is being told by the fear behind you. If you're enjoying it, and you're getting the shape of it, subscribe to the channel. And if you are hearing this on a channel that is not ours, know that they lifted it without permission and know that it costs nothing to tell us. So a comment, a link, a mention, that's all. We do the rest. Now come back with me up past the wheel. Because Vessey is walking, and he is only about halfway to what he is walking toward. The road behind the mill was narrower than it had been. In some places it was hardly a road at all. Just a foot track along the creek, worn deep by 100 years of the same feet walking the same line. He walked slowly. He looked for tracks. He found some. He found the print of a bare foot in a patch of clay. A broad, heavy print, splayed wide at the toes, like a foot that had never worn a shoe. Not a small foot, not a child's foot. A grown man's foot, wide and long, and beside it another the same size, and another, and another. 4 sets of prints, all going down toward the mill, all coming back up toward the hollow, and none of them booted. He looked for a while at those prints. He thought about how deep the clay was. He thought about how you get a print that deep in clay that firm. He thought about weight. He thought about how much a barefoot man weighs against a booted man. And he thought about how much more a barefoot man weighs when he is carrying something. He did not like his own arithmetic. He kept walking. About a mile up the road, he passed a place that had once been a small homestead. There was no house left, but there was a chimney and a hearthstone and a half, buried grinding stone. There was a plow lying on its side, red with rust, so old the rust itself had gone gray. And there was, driven into the trunk of a chestnut tree, beside what had been the door, a piece of iron, not a nail, not a hook, a shaped piece of iron, bent into a rough letter that looked like an H, with a crossbar too low and one leg longer than the other. The iron was polished at the top, where a hand had gripped it many times. It had been driven into that tree, into that dead homestead, as a mark. Vessey did not touch it. He knew a claim when he saw one, and he knew the difference between a claim you make on the living and a claim you make on the taken. This was the second kind. He kept walking. He passed two more of these, had two more empty foundations, same iron, same shape, same polished top, from the same kind of grip. Whoever the Harrows had been in 1798, they had over 4 generations put their brand on every place that was not theirs anymore, and they had done it slow, one grip at a time. He reached the broken oak at dusk. The oak was as tall as a steeple. Lightning had opened it, top to root 30 or 40 years back, and it had healed around the wound, growing back over the split, so that the tree now looked from the road like a hand holding itself. On the trunk, at the height a man reaches without stretching, there was a set of cuts. Not a warning, not writing, a tally. Little short vertical strokes in groups of 5, 4 straight and 1 across. He counted the groups. And I want you to sit with this number, listener, because this is where the story turns. He counted 11 groups of 5 and 3 more strokes on their own. That is 58 strokes. That is 50, 8 of something added up on the last honest tree before you get to their house. He did not know what the strokes counted. He did not want to know yet. He camped that night in a stand of laurel just off the road. He did not light a fire. He ate the hardtack cold, and he drank from the creek with the water, tasting like the iron rings on a coffin. And he watched the road. In the middle of the night, he heard footsteps, bare feet coming down, not running, not sneaking, walking. A slow, unhurried, heavy walk, the walk of somebody who had walked this piece of ground 1,000 times and did not need his eyes. Vessey did not move. The footsteps passed him 12 feet away. Then they stopped. He heard breathing, long, patient, unhurried breathing, the breath of a body that had done hard work all day and was resting between rooms. He heard a sniff. He heard a long, slow sniff twice, 3 times, the way a hound sniffs when it thinks it has something. And then a voice, not close, not loud. A woman's voice from further up the road calling one word, a word he did not know, 2 syllables, not English, not Cherokee, not anything he had ever heard in 13 years of federal service across 5 states. And the walker on the road answered with the same word, and then walked on uphill away at the same unhurried pace. Vessey lay in the laurel until dawn. He did not sleep. When it was light enough to see his hand in front of his face, he stood, brushed the leaves off his coat, and walked in the tracks the bare feet had left in the frost, up the last mile of road toward the clearing. A breath here before what comes next. If this is the kind of case you'd want to sit with in the dark, not just hear it once, but keep it. There's a collection I put together with the people at Forbidden Unresolved Stories. What the Mountain Keeps. 10 complete cases, 8 hours, 60, 2 years of records nobody wanted to finish. Each one placed, dated, and signed off with a tidy word that never once fit what happened. The link is in the description below and at the top of the comments. Let's go back to it. The clearing was smaller than he had pictured, less than an acre, ringed by tall, dark hemlocks that grew close enough to make a wall. In the middle of the clearing was the house. It was not at first sight a bad house. It was a 2-story frame house of hand, hewn logs, chinked with clay, with a stone chimney at one end and a lean-to at the back. It had glass in some of the windows. It had a proper door. It had at one time been painted. There was still a ghost of white at the corners where the weather had not eaten through. What was wrong with the house? You had to look at for a moment to see. The wrong began with the windows. There were curtains behind them. Heavy curtains, brown as old blood, drawn tight across every pane downstairs and up. But at the bottom of each window there was a narrow gap, about 2 fingers wide, where the curtain did not quite meet the sill. It was the gap of a curtain that had been arranged deliberately so that someone inside could sit low on the floor, perhaps, and look out without being seen. Every window was arranged that way. Every one. The wrong went on with the door. The door had a lock, but the lock was on the outside. A great iron hasp driven into the frame from without. A padlock the size of a fist hanging open in it. It was the lock of a barn, not a house. It was the lock of a place where the important business was keeping something in. The wrong ended with the yard. The yard was clean, not tidy. Clean. There was no grass. The dirt had been swept, and swept recently, in long, careful lines with a straw broom. There were no wagon ruts. There were no chicken tracks. There were no dog prints. There were no shoe prints. There were only bare feet, many of them overlapping, long, wide, splayed at the toes, exactly like the prints on the road. Vessey stopped at the edge of the hemlocks. He watched the house for an hour. Nothing moved. No smoke from the chimney, though the morning was cold. No sound from inside, though the walls were thin. Once, and only once, in that first hour, he thought he saw the curtain in the upstairs window on the left twitch. Just the bottom edge, just enough to widen the gap, and narrow it again. He waited. Nothing. He walked into the yard. His boots made noise in the swept dirt. He was aware, walking, of how his boots looked in that yard. Too clean, too new. Wrong. He was aware of how a marshal's coat looked at that door in that clearing. Like a costume. Like a man dressed as a man in a place where a man was the thing they hunted. He knocked on the door. There was a silence that went on longer than a silence should. And then, from the other side of the door, from very close, the way a person stands when they have been standing there the whole time, a voice said, in a whisper that was almost polite, "What do you want, coming to the door for?" Vessey said, "My name is Obadiah Vessey. I am a Deputy United States Marshal. I am here about 3 men, Ezra Wickfield, Barnaby Chessup, Odom Whitlatch. Have you seen these men?" The voice waited, and then it said, "Come inside, Marshal, and we will tell you." He did not go inside. He said, "I would rather you come out. I would rather we talk on your porch. I would rather see who is speaking to me." There was another silence. Then the voice, closer to the door now, the voice of an old woman, or an old man imitating one, said, "We do not come out, Marshal. We have not come out in a long while. If you want to talk, you talk in here." The door opened. It opened by itself all the way. No hand on it, no face behind it. There was only the inside of the house, dim, warm, smelling of wood smoke and old grease, and something sweet Vessey did not want to think about. And from further back, in a room he could not see into, the voice said, "Come in, Marshal. Come in and see us." Vessey did not go in. He did the thing every man in his line of work is trained to do, and every man in his line of work eventually forgets to do at least once. He took 1 step back. He put his hand on his sidearm, and he said, "If you have something to tell me from the door." From the room he could not see into, another voice, a man's voice this time, low and unhurried and not far, said, "Marshal, there are 8 of us in here. 8 grown people. If we wanted you already, you would be already had. But we don't yet. We are asking you. Come in, sit down, have a cup of what we have, and we will tell you where those 3 men are." Vessey stood in the doorway of that house for what he later told a doctor was the longest 30 seconds of his life. In those 30 seconds, he did a small piece of arithmetic in his head. He counted the tally on the tree, 58. He counted the missing men on record with the county, 3. He counted the peddlers, the surveyors, the timber cruisers, the revenue agents, the road runners, the itinerant preachers, the census men, the drifters, the divers, the people who had gone up that road since 1798 without a wife to raise the alarm. He got a number bigger than 3. He got a number that made 58 look modest. And he understood, in the doorway of that house, in that hemlock clearing, that the sheriff of Marlin County had brought him in on 3 cases, because 3 was what the sheriff of Marlin County could bear to write down. Not because 3 was all there were. He took a second step back. His boot went into the sweat dirt behind him without a sound. And without warning, one of the swept lines in the dirt moved. It rose. It was not dirt. It had been dirt on top of something, and the something was standing up. A grown man, bare streaked with a fine, pale mud, who had been lying flat in the yard, behind him the whole time he had been at the door. He was rising with the patience of a man who had done this before and knew he had all the time in the world. Vessey drew his sidearm and fired once into the ground at the man's feet and shouted, "On the ground! On the ground! On the ground!" From the house, from all sides of the house, from the hemlocks, from the roof, quietly, unhurriedly, the way you rise from a family table at the end of grace, 6 more of them stood up, bare, streaked. The oldest of them was a woman as tall as Vessey, with hair the color of ash. The youngest, if you can call a person of 38 young, was a man missing 3 fingers on his left hand, from what looked at a glance like an old healed bite. None of them ran. None of them charged. They stood in a loose ring around him and the door, and they waited. And from the doorway, still without a face, the polite voice said, "Come in, Marshal. It is easier if you come in on your own." It always has been. Vessey did not come in. He did a thing that saved his life, and he would tell you later he did not decide to do it. His body did it before he did. He turned, at a walk, not a run, toward the narrowest gap in the ring, where the swept dirt met the hemlocks. And he walked through it with his sidearm level, and his eyes of the eyes of the woman with the ash-colored hair. She did not step aside. She did not step forward. She looked at him the way you look at a plate of food you have decided, for now, to let cool. He walked past her. He walked into the hemlocks. And once he was in the hemlocks, he ran. Behind him, he heard no footfalls. He heard from the clearing one clear, unhurried sound. He heard the door of the house close. That was all. That was, in some ways, the worst thing he heard the whole trip. Because a family that shuts the door after the marshal has run knows the marshal is not gone. Only postponed. He ran until his lungs would not take another breath. He ran until his legs were water. He ran the road back down to the broken oak and past it and past the empty foundations with their claim iron. And he ran until, above the creek, he saw the smoke of Zephaniah Kroll's small, brave fire. 24 hours after the man had said he would leave, Zephaniah was on his feet with his rifle in his hands before Vessey came around the last bend. He said, "Oh God, Obadiah, look at your face. Look at your face." Vessey did not know what his face looked like. He knew what he had seen. He said, "We go now. We go now, and we do not look back, and we do not speak until we are past 2 miles short, and we do not stop until we are in Red Gap." Zephaniah looked once, only once, up the road toward the mill, and then he untied both horses and gave Vessey the reins of the fast one, and they rode. They did not speak until 2 miles short. They did not speak, in fact, until Zephaniah's own front porch 3 days later, when he had put Vessey down on a rope bed with 3 blankets and half a bottle of the good whiskey. He kept behind a stone in the fireplace. Then Vessey spoke. He said, "They were waiting for me in the yard, under the dirt. They were waiting under the dirt." And Zephaniah said, "Oh God, Obadiah, oh God." Vessey wrote his report over 3 days in the sheriff's office. He wrote it in a hand that shook so bad the ink blotted on some of the letters. He wrote what he had seen. He wrote what he had counted on the oak. He wrote his arithmetic. He wrote about the door that opened by itself, and the man who stood up out of the swept dirt, and the woman with the ash-colored hair who looked at him as if postponing a meal. He gave the report to Sheriff Culpepper. Culpepper read it once, slow, without moving. He put it down. He said, "Marshal, this report will not go to Wheeling as it stands." Vessey said, "Sheriff, it will." Culpepper said, "Marshal, if this report goes to Wheeling, they will send 50 men up that road, and 50 men on that road will not solve anything. 50 men on that road will make a bigger tally on the oak, and it will not stop until the last man in West Virginia has stood in that yard in his boots and been counted. That family does not lose to numbers. They have been up there against numbers for 75 years. Vessey said, "Sheriff, then what would you have me do?" And Culpepper said, "The sentence I want you to remember, listener, because it is the sentence that decides how a story like this ends and how a story like this doesn't." He said, "Marshal, I would have you write a different report. A report that says 3 men were lost on a difficult road in bad country. A report that recommends the road be closed at 2 miles short and a wall built there, and a warning nailed to that wall in 3 languages, so that no man who does not already know goes up. That is the report I can act on. That is the report the county can pay for. That is the report that saves the next 3 men." Vessey looked at him for a long time, and then he wrote that report, and Culpepper signed it. And in the winter of 1873, the county did build a wall of piled stone at 2 miles short, and did nail a warning to it, and did close the road. And the first report, the one Vessey wrote in a shaking hand, went into a locked drawer in the sheriff's office, and stayed there through Culpepper's tenure, and through his successors, and through the fire of 1902 that took half the courthouse, but left the sheriff's office standing, and was, so far as we can tell, only read again in 1951 by a WPA historian named Marion Dell, who is not permitted to copy it, but who wrote down enough of it in a private notebook, now held at a small archive in Charleston, that we know today what Vessey saw, and what Vessey saw is what I have told you. Obadiah Vessey resigned his commission in the spring of 1874. He did not go home. He went west and worked for the rest of his life as a stagecoach guard on lines in Colorado and Wyoming. His widow, who married him in 1878, said in later years that he never slept with a window uncurtained, and never sat with his back to a door, and never, ever ate a meal that had been put on his plate by a hand he had not seen do it. He died in Cheyenne in 1911 at 79 of a bad heart and a long life. Zephaniah Kroll never went up the road again. He did not have to. His homestead was 2 miles below the wall, and he lived there another 22 years. And he told the story of what he had seen at the mill and heard at the fire, and read on Vessey's face when he came down out of the hemlocks exactly once, to his nephew on the night before he died. Sheriff Merritt Culpepper served 3 more terms. He never opened the drawer with Vessey's first report in it. When he retired, he handed the key to his successor without a word, and his successor did the same, and so on down 4 sheriffs until 1922, when the drawer was finally forced open by a curious clerk, who took one look, put the pages back, and locked it again with a new key, which he then hid. Which is why we have Marion Dell's notes and not the pages themselves. The wall at 2 miles short is still there. It has been rebuilt twice, the last time in 1949. The warning is now in English only, and it says nothing about a family and nothing about a hollow. It says the road is unmaintained and impassable, and the county assumes no liability. Which is true. As for the Harrows themselves, in 1911, a timber cruiser working the far side of the ridge reported smoke rising from a clearing on the wrong side of the creek. In 1928, a pilot flying mail from Elkins to Charleston at low altitude in a bad fog reported seeing, for a second, in a fold of the mountain that his map did not show, a settlement. The pitched roof of a 2-story frame house. He reported it once in the pilot's lounge and then never again, because he was laughed at. In 1946, a party of 2 hikers went up from 2 miles short past the wall on a dare. One came out 4 days later. He never spoke publicly about what he saw. He gave a private statement to the state police that has been sealed by court order until the year 2072. The other one did not come out at all. And when a search party was formed and reached the mill, they found the wheel turning on a creek that, by then, in late September, in a dry year, should not have had enough water in it to turn a paper boat. And in the moss on the wheel, near the top, there was a fresh handprint in mud, of a bare hand, wider at the palm than any hand a doctor in the party had ever measured on a living person. And that is where I have to leave it. Because that is where the record leaves it. There is no ending to this story that closes it. The Harrows. If they were ever a family, if they are still a family, if the thing that spoke through the door in 1873 is still the thing that puts a mud print on the mill wheel in 1946, are not on any tax roll, in any census, in any registry of births and deaths, in any court record, in any deed book. They are on one page in the back of Marion Dell's notebook, in a hand that shakes a little at the bottom of a paragraph that describes the yard and the swept lines, and the door that opened by itself. The last line of that paragraph, and the last line of the whole account, and I want to read it to you as it stands, without embroidery, is this. Deputy Marshal Vessey states in conclusion that he does not believe the Harrow family, as of the 4th of October 1873, is properly counted among the living, nor is he prepared to count them among the dead. He recommends the road be closed. He recommends the wall be built. He recommends the county wait and watch, and above all, do not go up past the mill wheel. And you, listener, if you have ever been up on a ridge that felt like it was leaning down toward you and heard a bird call answered by something that was not a bird and thought, for one bad half-second, that the woods had noticed you back, leave it in the comments. I want to know where it happened. I want to know what year. I want to know if you turned around. I want to know if the woods let you. Because there are a lot more of these than 3. And there are a lot more of these than 58. And every county in these mountains has a wall somewhere, and a road that ends at that wall, and a story about a family the sheriff decided not to write down. That is the country I live in. That is the country you are. Most of you listening to me from tonight. Take care of yourselves out there. Do not go up past the mill wheel. Stick with us for the next one. Until then,